Did you know that you can meet with a lactation consultant prenatally? Did you know that there is so much that you can learn about in a prenatal consult that could set you up for success in the last trimester and then when you give birth, so that you can feel really prepared in the hospital or in the birthing center or during your home birth, so that you start out on the right foot and feel really confident starting out about breastfeeding or feeding your baby from your body, chest feeding or pumping, so that when the time comes, you don't have that feeling of anxiety that I hear so many of my guests talk about when they say that they felt caught off guard when it comes to breastfeeding. So that's what today's episode is all about. What happens during a prenatal consult with an IBCLC. So stay tuned.
When I began breastfeeding, I was blindsided by how difficult it was. I may have thought I was prepared, but having known only a handful of people who had ever breastfed and only seeing it up close from a couple of them, I had a huge learning curve. Since then, I've become a doula, a lactation consultant, and a childbirth educator. I'm your host, Lo Nigrosh, and I welcome you to the Milk Making Minutes, where we explore breastfeeding experiences through the lens of systemic barriers, so that you know your breastfeeding struggles are not your fault, and your triumphs really are the miracles you feel they are.
The other day, I had an interview with a really amazing guest. I can't wait to get her podcast out. She is still processing what happened with her baby feeding experience. Once she decided to breastfeed, she became really committed to it. And like we hear happen with so many people across the world, she got blindsided by the experience. And after her cesarean, it took a while for her milk to come in. And then she never really did produce very much due to a variety of reasons. And then slowly over time, her milk just dried up. And she finally made the really tough decision to go strictly to formula and to not continue the cycle of pumping, feeling anxious about pumping, and focusing so much on pumping that she wasn't enjoying hardly any part of her motherhood because it became the primary focus of what she was doing for her baby. And during the course of that conversation, we got to talking about private practice IBCLCs and how that is an option. And this guest did not know that she could have met with a private practice IBCLC. She did have the opportunity to meet with the IBCLC that she saw in the hospital, and she did see that person a couple of times. And then she also had the opportunity to see an IBCLC that was associated with the practice where she had a release for a tongue tie, but she never did see a private practice IBCLC who could have given her really great support in her home or in a private practice office where there could have been a really long visit and continued support from the time of that visit and continuity of care. And from that conversation, we got to talking about how you can also see a private practice IBCLC prenatally. And that got me thinking about how so many people don't know about this option. And I thought it might be time to do an episode about this, because I know just from talking to people over the years that most people do not know that this is an option. And so with the Affordable Care Act, one of the requirements of insurance companies is they are required to pay for or reimburse for prenatal lactation education with an IBCLC. They're also required to pay for lactation education with a private practice IBCLC after the baby is born. Now, insurance companies find loopholes to get out of this payment, and sometimes it's not always very easy to get them to pay, but they are required by law to do this. And when I talk to my guests, most do go to the hospital and attend some sort of class at the hospital. Most also say that the class, unfortunately, is not very helpful. And when I hear from people about why the class at the hospital is not helpful, what I'm hearing is that the class focuses on what happens physiologically with milk supply under very normal circumstances, but leaves out what could happen if milk supply is delayed, given less than ideal birth situations, or what a person could be doing in the third trimester to see what their milk making situation could be potentially. There is no individualized care in those classes. It does not talk about how to problem solve if things are not ideal. Those classes do not help people navigate the systemic failures that often occur if baby has dropped below 10% of their weight loss, or if baby has had IV fluids and really hasn't dropped below 10% of their weight loss, but supplementation is being recommended, or if baby isn't latching well, or baby is latching, but the person who is feeding the baby is in severe pain, or it does not bring up tethered oral ties. There are a variety of considerations that can impact feeding the baby from the body that are not brought up in these classes that impact so many people trying to feed their babies. So, what happens during a prenatal consult? First of all, I encourage you, if you are considering doing a prenatal consult, to contact multiple IBCLCs in your area. So here in Massachusetts, for instance, we have an organization called Zip Milk. Zipmilk.org is available in quite a few states, not all, but this organization is working to expand to all states, where you can look up breastfeeding supporters by zip code. And you can look up free supporters, you can look up IBCLCs, and you just look up by zip code, and then it pulls up all the supporters within a certain mile radius near you. You can also use the IBCLC search on the U.S. Lactation Consultants Association's page. So USLCA. I will put these links in the show notes, and you can do a zip code search there to find IBCLCs. You can alternatively call your insurance company and ask for their lactation providers. The difficulty with this is that, for instance, here in Massachusetts, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts is one of our primary insurance companies in the state, but they're listed in network providers for lactation care. None of them are actually IBCLCs. None of them actually have lactation training. And so what we have to do in Massachusetts in this case is our Blue Cross Blue Shield members pay for lactation care up front, and then we provide super bills with a specific form that they turn in to Blue Cross Blue Shield, and they get reimbursed by the insurance company. So you have to be careful when you get those lists and check to see that the providers that you are going to are actually trained in providing lactation care. But you can get that list from your insurance company because some do actually have IBCLCs on the list. Or you can just do Google searches for IBCLCs in your area. So once you have your list, I would go ahead, like you do with any provider, and contact a few. You can decide if you would like to go to somebody who has an office where you go and meet with them in their office, or if you would like to meet with somebody who comes to your home. Some considerations. Ideally, the person who you meet with prenatally is going to be the same person that you meet with after you give birth. When you meet with them prenatally, it is probably great to meet with them in the office. But in those immediate days and weeks postpartum, if you are going to need to see them and you're still healing from giving birth and it is difficult to pack up the baby and get everything in the car, and maybe it's going to be icy out or there's going to be bad weather, it is quite difficult to get out of the house in those first few days and weeks with the baby, especially if you're having trouble feeding. And so you may want to consider somebody who at least has the option of coming to your house so that you are not having to manage getting out of the house in those first few days and weeks. So once you have talked to a few people, and when you talk to them, make sure that it's somebody who you really feel listened to and who understands your goals and who is not pushing their lactation agenda on you. So if you think that you would like to sleep and not be breastfeeding through the night, and in that case, you know that you will be feeding formula through the night, and in your mind, your mental health and being able to sleep is more important to you than maintaining your milk supply, and you are upfront with this lactation professional about that, and they push a different agenda on you during that first conversation, that might not be the person for you. Because you want somebody who is going to support your goals. You do not want somebody who is going to try to change your goals to be whatever they think your goals should be. So make sure that they're really listening to what your goals are, because it is not my job as a lactation professional to try to get everybody to adapt to what my lactation goals were. It's my job to educate people on how milk supply works, and then knowing that to help clients reach their goals given what I know about milk supply and what they know about their babies as they're getting to know their babies and their own bodies. Okay, so once you've chosen your lactation professional, you can go ahead and have that prenatal education meeting. And I would have this towards the end of the second trimester, going into the third trimester. And the lactation professional, she's going to spend some time just listening to what your history is, what your history of fertility is, what your history of trauma is, if you have any. She is going to want to know about any changes to your breasts during pregnancy. She's going to want to know if you have had any surgeries. So if you've had any augmentation or reductions, or if there has been any trauma to your breasts at all. So, if you have had a car accident that impacted your breasts, or any kind of high impact uh, to your breast at all, she's going to want to know about that. If you've had any history of sexual assault and you are concerned about that, she's going to want to know about that, because that could impact your goals. And then she is going to want to see your breasts or your chest and your nipples. And she's going to give you some advice about what your feeding goals could be based on your hormonal history and what your nipples and your breasts look like and the changes. And she's going to have you talk to your prenatal care provider about the possibility of harvesting colostrum starting in the late third trimester, so that you have that ready and in your freezer for your baby if it is needed and if you so desire. And she's going to have you practice stimulating your nipples and seeing if you can get them to evert. And then in that third trimester consult, she's going to talk to you about the various scenarios that could occur given your birth preferences. And she's going to help you craft your feeding preferences, lining up with your birth preferences, and help you have conversations with your care provider given those birth preferences. And that way, once you do give birth, you are going to feel really ready, regardless of the birth setting, to get off on the right foot. And you will most likely have her email or her text to be able to ask her questions. That way, if you are in the hospital and they are busy and you're asking for the lactation department to come visit you and nobody is coming, you have somebody. And you are not reliant on a hospital system that is overcrowded or that does not have enough lactation providers to give you the help that you deserve. And you will feel at ease about that. And that is why it is worth every penny if you are in a position to be able to spend that money. And then, you can still meet with that hospital-based IBCLC to get the support you need there in the hospital, to get a set of eyes on the baby. But the lactation consultant who you meet with prenatally can give you some language. When the lactation consultant in the hospital comes to the room, you know the right questions to ask. They can give you some good language to really get some good feedback about what your feeding is like, based on what your body looks like, whether you have a large body or a smaller body, whether your breasts are really big or really small, whether your nipples are everted or inverted, or whether they're big or whether they're small. You'll have really good feedback from your private practice lactation consultant to be able to ask that hospital-based lactation care team about your feeding based on that consult that you already had. And then once you go home, you will have that lactation consultant. They will have your paperwork already on file because they've already met with you once. And all you'll need to do is fill in the additional birth history information and how feeding has been going. And then they'll be ready for that first in-person consult once you go home to be able to provide you additional care if you were to need it. And I will tell you that with my second child, I was already a lactation professional. I was a certified lactation counselor. I was not having tons of trouble, but I still wanted another set of eyes and I wanted to get some additional support. And so I reached out to an IBCLC, Shelley Taft. I did get to interview her for my podcast, and I will link that in the show notes. She's amazing, and she's one of the IBCLCs that I have looked up to as I have been on this journey to become an IBCLC. So if this sounds like something that you really would like to do, and you have been listening to these episodes and have been thinking, wow, I would really like that prenatally, and you would like to do that with me because you've heard the way that I listen and respond to guests. Consults sound different than podcast episodes, obviously, but you would like that individualized care, and you want in-person consults if you live in Massachusetts or Southern New Hampshire or Southern Vermont. Reach out to me. If you would like a virtual prenatal consult from anywhere, then you can contact me as well. All of my information is in the show notes. You can find me at my website, quabbinbirthservices.com. I would love to be the person who educates you prenatally. And if you are far away and you would like to have a prenatal consult with me, but then you would like to get in-person care from somebody else, I can help you find that IBCLC in your community who can be a great fit for you where you are. So I would love to be involved in that search for you. If you are a provider and you would like to be added to my list of providers who are breaking down barriers and frustrated by the systemic and cultural barriers that exist that make feeding our babies from our bodies so difficult, I would love to start building a referral list from all across the country that we can start sending listeners to. Here's what you need to do. Join my Milk Making Minutes community group. Introduce yourself as a provider who sees these barriers. You can be a CLC, you can be an IBCLC, you can be a certified breastfeeding counselor, a CBC. If there's some other certification out there that I'm not aware of, you can be one of those as well. And if you're a doula or a postpartum doula who provides care to people in the perinatal period at all, please join my Milk Making Minutes community. I love that you are listening, that you care about this. And that's what that community is for. It's for anybody who cares about these systemic failures and wants it to be easier for our clients and for ourselves. So I'll see you there.